Did you know there's a Cinderella story from Iran where Cinderella murders her mother so she can get a tattoo? And it just gets wilder from there. It's called The Story of How Fatima Killed Her Mother and What Came of It. There's an old woman whose job is tattooing, which has a long history in the Middle East. It's not so much popular now, but if you Google it, you can find lots of images of older women who did it back when it was more popular. So this girl named Fatima tells her mother, hey, I'm gonna go get tattooed. The mom's like, cool, here's some bread to go pay the tattoo lady. So she goes to the tattoo lady, says, here's some bread, please tattoo me. But the tattoo lady says, I'll do it if you go kill your mother. Instead of, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Fatima says, how am I supposed to do that? So the old woman tells her the wackiest murder plot, which is to tell her mom to climb up into a pomegranate tree to the very top to get her the best pomegranate. And then while she's up there, yell, oh mother, your brother just died. And then her mother will be so startled and sad, she'll fall from the tree and die. So our girl goes home and does that, and she kills her mother. And of course, everyone thinks it's an accident. So our girl Fatima goes back to the old lady and says, all right, now tattoo me. And she's like, no, you got to get your father to marry me now. So Fatima convinces her father to marry the woman, and she gets brought home to be her new mother. So Fatima says, now will you tattoo me? And the woman says, go away and die, because it was all a con. Our girl never even gets her tattoo. So Fatima goes to her mother's grave and she's like, Mom, I'm so sorry. I got tricked into killing you by the old tattoo lady. I regret it so much. Especially because the evil stepmother now is starving her. But that night, her mother comes to her in her sleep and says, hey, go to your uncle, probably the brother she thought died, and ask for a yellow calf. Then keep that yellow calf secret. Every time you smack it on the ear, food will come out of the ear and you can eat whatever you want, which is actually a common way that starved Cinderellas get their food in these folktales. Meanwhile, the evil tattoo stepmother has had two daughters of her own, and they have the names Four Eyes and Four Stumps. It is not explained why. I'm assuming because that's what they look like. They're all pretty poor, so the stepmother's daughters keep getting thinner and thinner every day, but Fatima is getting fatter and fatter, and she's jealous and wants to know why she's not starving. She sends Four Eyes to go spy on Fatima, but Fatima is super nice and says, hey, Four Eyes, I'll tell you the secret of how I get this food, and I'll even share it with you. And Four Eyes is so grateful when they feast from the cow ear together. She's like, I'll keep your secret, and she does. So then the evil stepmother sends Four Stumps out with Fatima, and Four Stumps is a snitch and tells on her. So evil stepmother now wants to get rid of the cow, and so she goes to a doctor in town and pays him to lie to her husband and say she's dying and the only thing that will cure her is the cow. So the dad goes to Fatima and says, all right, give me the cow, I have to kill it. And Fatima's like, Dad, she is fooling you, this is all lies. In response, her father beats her with a stick and then stretches out the calf and tries to cut its head off with a knife, but Fatima yells, edge of knife like back of knife, and then the knife is dull and he cannot do it. So he starts to beat her with a stick again until she allows the knife to kill the calf. Fatima goes to her mom's grave and says, what do I do now? And her mother says, go to the house of a div. Divs are supernatural creatures in Middle Eastern mythology that can be men or women, and sometimes they look like humans, sometimes they look like big scary monsters. The div the mom wants her to go to is named Allah Zingi, and she says he'll want to put his head in your lap and have you comb his hair, and when he does, you need to say that his comb is the best comb. So Fatima does this, and the div is super pleased that she thinks his comb is the best comb, and he's so happy that he says, all right, you're my child now, I'll give you whatever you want. So he puts a moon on her chin and the sun on her forehead and a pair of slippers studded with jewels and all the gold she wants, and she leaves. As she's going along, though, she drops one of the slippers, and this prince finds it and says, whoever wears the slipper must be beautiful, because that makes sense. So he goes to a wise old woman, and he's like, find out whose slipper this is. And she says, I'll find out if you give me all the flour and syrup I can eat. And he has to pay her up front, and he does. She eats all the flour and syrup she can stomach, and then she's like, all right, I'll go find your girl. And it doesn't take her long because she sees Fatima on the road crying and holding one slipper, sad because she lost the other, and she's like, oh girl, come with me. So she comes and meets the prince is into her, she's into him, and he asks for her hand in marriage, and she says yes. They get married, and a year later, Fatima has a son. In the meantime, her two stepsisters have gone to that div to try and get the luck she had, but of course they say everything wrong, they don't obey him, and so instead of giving the moon and star to them, he puts a bull's tail on each of their chins and donkey ears on their foreheads. But guys, it's not over. Four Eyes just accepts her donkey tail and bull tail, but Four Stumps is mad. And one day when she sees Fatima out bathing, she takes her by the hair, ties her to a tree, leaves her there, and a tiger comes and eats Fatima, kills her. But one single drop of her blood fell to the ground and a reed sprung up from the blood. That'll be important later. In the meantime, Four Stumps goes to try and take over Fatima's life. She puts on a veil to hide her donkey ears and stuff. She can't nurse her baby, so she feeds it on cow milk, and every time the husband tries to talk to her, she hides her face and chews on the donkey ear and bull tail to try and get them off, but she can't. The prince knows something's up, but he doesn't know what to do about it until one day he goes out hunting. A shepherd has made a whistle out of the reed that grew from Fatima's blood, and he's playing on it, and the whistle speaks the story of her murder. On hearing these words, the prince was greatly pleased and said, "This whistle is news of my wife." So he just takes the whistle from the shepherd, saying, "This is for my son to play with now," because he's a prince. Four Stumps knows what's up with this whistle, so she grabs it and hides it in a jar. But then at night, Fatima, who has risen from the dead, comes out of the jar and looks beautiful and glows. The light draws her husband in, but she goes right back in the jar, and he's like, wife, come out of the jar." And she's like, "I can't, I'm naked." And he's like, "Well, I'll go get you clothes." So he gets her clothes, she comes out, confirmed everything that happened. Then to punish both of the sisters, because I guess Four Eyes didn't say what happened even though she knew. So the prince got 2 wild mules, 2 broken pots, 2 savage dogs, and then had the 2 sisters tied by their hair to the tails of the mules and turned them loose, with the dogs yapping and the pots banging and clanging, and the women wailing and shrieking until the wild mules kicked them into little bits, and then they went to hell. Quite the punishment. But nothing ever happens to their mother, who actually started all of this in the first place. But I guess at least Fatima is safe now, and maybe one day hopefully gets those tattoos she wanted so badly in the first place.